here we are, mate. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming down.
Courtney. Thanks.
Really enjoyed the lunch we just had, and there's all sorts of reasons why we grabbed the lunch, but for today, the main reason is to catch up with you as Paul the Volunteer.
Yep.
Could you introduce yourself as Paul the Volunteer, please?
Right. I'm Paul. I've been a member at Waratah Beach Surf Lifesaving Club since 1975.
Since when?
1975.
Oh, wow. You're dwarfing me, mate.
When I got my bronze medallion.
Right.
I was never much of an athlete, but at that time I was very involved in the active side of things and the at that stage examination and assessment stuff.
Yep.
Involved in a lot of state level activities.
Right.
Travelled to the US with a team.
Competing?
Not competing as a manager.
Right.
I did. That's probably the fittest I've ever been because I trained with the team. But, never quite caught up to anybody on any of the swims or anything else we did. But stayed really, really involved until the kids came along and the house came along.
Yep.
By that stage, I was already a life member. So about 20 years ago, I sort of started turning up to the annual meeting, and that's about all.
Yeah.
Then about 5 years ago, there was a note that came out from the club that asked for a treasurer.
Right.
Because the president at the time was standing aside for a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah. Happens in volunteering, funnily enough, doesn't it?
Well, yes. It turned out to be quite a sad case, but that's a different story.
Yes.
So, treasurer, I thought, I've got a reasonable background. I've managed
this will be
businesses.
easy. This is super easy.
How hard can it be? Well, at the start of COVID, it was fortunate that I was home all the time because there was a lot of effort went into rearranging the books.
Yeah.
And trying to untangle a whole lot of things that didn't quite meet the way I wanted to run the book. So it took a long time to reorganise. So now for 5 years, we've pretty got ourselves into a stable position.
Brilliant.
Now, back in 1998, we started building a new clubhouse. And
houses take a lot shorter than 25 or 27 years,
no, we
right?
started building after quite a few years of fundraising. And
fundraising, we're going to get back to that. So I'm going to keep on interjecting, but no, please continue.
So the clubhouse was built and opened in 2000, happy days. Because we had a great president at the time,
right?
Chris ended up after the building with additional funds left over.
Jeez.
Because at the end of the build...
Was he the builder?
Well, he is actually a builder.
Oh, right,
he was project manager.
Beautiful, yep.
But he was one of these guys that's really essential in a club who goes out and asks.
Okay.
Lysarts, can you put a roof on for us?
Yep.
We budgeted to do it. We raised the funds for it. They did it.
Wow.
So we ended up with a substantial amount of funds. The reason I mention that is when I became president... That's my mistake, treasurer. When I became treasurer, there was a year of stability, and then because I'd come back, that former president came back and said, those funds have accumulated over the years.
Let's go do something.
Let's go do something. So we renovated the social room or the bar.
Yeah.
Got quite a few people coming in over summer. One of the members gave up every single weekend except his birthday and the Grand Prix. He took those weekends off.
Member became volunteer.
He was a member and a volunteer.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Who went down every weekend to open up the bar.
Yeah.
Every single weekend.
Amazing.
So the following year we had a bit of consolidation, and then the next year we spent another $400,000 doing an extension to the club with a balcony up the front and some toilets that suited the bar better and kept the public who were using the bar out of the toilets that the members used.
Yeah.
Just segregation, it's just part of life these days. So it's been a pretty exciting time really developing the club.
Yeah, amazing. And so we touched on a couple of subjects there. One was fundraising. We look over in the background at all of these retailers and businesses like NAB who are involved in helping clubs and causes around Australia. How did you go about your fundraising, do you recall, and who came up? You also mentioned something which I love was Contra.
Yeah.
A lot of clubs don't think about, or organisations think about contra. So talk about a couple of those things if you could, please.
Gee, I should have this all top of mind. Look, the best example is we try to give back every time.
Right.
So one of our main fundraisers
Yeah.
is a thing we call the Current Cruiser. Again, one of our members put his hand up and said, can't go on the board, haven't got time for it very much. He's very involved in our offshore rescue service.
Yep.
So he's the captain there now, but he runs the Current Cruiser. So we all jump into shallow inlet.
Okay.
It's timed so that you jump in at one end and basically float to the other end.
Right.
Some people swim.
Right.
But it's 1,500 metres.
It's like the duck run at Yarrawonga, same sort of thing. Yeah. First one over the line, all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
but
fun.
But it's with the current.
Yeah.
And we get a whole lot of sponsors through that.
Oh, amazing.
But the sponsors get their name on a T-shirt. They feel like they're supporting a club, which in fact they are.
Yep.
This year we're putting a bit more emphasis on not just going to the regulars and the people who are already associated with us, but also to businesses who are looking for a chance to support.
It's a considered effort, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, this is the challenge, and Paul. The one thing we've identified, there's a few big ticket items that you have to do in order to run a club, charity, or cause. One of them you identify as fundraising, and that's clearly something.
Yes.
Some of us are lucky; we've got memberships as well that sit off the back of that.
Yep.
Some of the times we forget how luxurious it is to have guaranteed money coming in. What are some of the other things? Let me just describe. You are a life-saving club. You're in Victoria, which means that people are prepared to get in cold water. That's part one. So our burly heads and crew up high north. You get it real nice. You should come and have a swim down Victoria one day. But the interesting thing that came out of conversations with those guys, and you mentioned before the interview, was age group discrepancies and how do we deal with the changing of the guard. Can you talk to that a little bit, please?
Yeah. There seems to be, and I'll be blunt in saying this, there seems to be an expectation from people in that 15 to 20, a bit more, a bit less, but that sort of age group, that lots of things just happen. Mm-hmm. But there's an enormous amount of work that goes on to make them happen.
Yep.
And we're trying very hard to provide the example for things so that cohort...
Like blueprints or leading by example?
Leading by example.
Right. Yeah, okay.
For example, over Christmas, we just spent under $400,000, but...
So you're an affluent club as well, which is nice to see.
Well, no, we...
Travelling all right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
It's always an undertone there, yeah.
Well, we've reimbursed part of that that fund.
Yeah, okay.
And I hope that over the next 2 years, as a return on investment, we have this bar, and we're opening it up to more and more people in the community. Mm-hmm. Bear in mind, our club services an estate of 700 housing lots.
Oh, right.
And that's it.
Yep.
So that's our entire market. Incidentally, what that means for members is they all stay either in the clubhouse or in their own holiday house. Yeah. There's, for all intents and purposes, no locals who are members. So everybody drives down from Melbourne.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We do have one girl who comes from Fish Creek, the nearest town.
That's amazing.
She's been phenomenal. She's done hundreds of hours of patrol. 243, I think, was the number of hours rostered on patrol.
Yeah.
So this cohort I'm talking about does a lot of these really active things really, really well. There's somebody else that did over 200 patrolling hours. Yeah. Which means that it's almost every weekend that they're down there and rostered on.
Weekly. What does a volunteer week look like for you? Like in terms of how you look at your yourself. You know, actualisation is really hard from a volunteer's perspective. Yeah. They get caught in their dream and their passion, and then all of a sudden someone taps on the shoulder, a partner or a friend, and says, "Do you know how much time you spend down at that joint that you're spending? You must love the paintwork or whatever it is." The truth is you do, right? Yes. You don't stay in something for 20 years and plus and not love what it's about. Talk to me about your role and what you facilitated.
So as treasurer,
yeah.
there's a portion of every day checking quite a few email accounts,
Yep.
flicking on the important things to some people, paying the bills, all those routine things. But I've got a bunch of monthly reporting,
Yes.
and as I was saying before, during January, these members, these kids, do a great amount of effort, but we want to give them this vision of what a business would look like.
Yeah.
So we've spent this $300,000 plus on a new balcony and toilets,
Yeah.
and we weren't going to open the bar midweek for that 3rd and 4th week of January.
Right.
So I said, no, I'll just relocate. We've got a little caretaker's flat attached to the club rooms.
Oh, wow.
So I just moved down there, tried to do my paid professional
Yeah.
work.
Did you hear that, everyone? Full-time volunteer, I think we're saying.
Full-time volunteer, trying to get some paid work done, so that we can operate the bar.
Yeah.
Open at 4 o'clock, I think we opened, and run it till the people go home, because we want to sweat the assets.
Yeah.
Now, was it to do with income and revenue? Oh, partly. But the main thing, my main justification, was to demonstrate the principle of sweating your assets in a business to that active member group.
Yeah, and what a learning if any of them actually absorb it. And this is the delicate bit of not only skills matching, which is clearly you've skills matched in a treasurer role, but also then to say, I am a business owner and have run businesses successfully.
Yes.
And in order to be successful, you need to get the maximum you can out of people and assets and other things. So that's a transfer of knowledge. How do you do that? What is there communication strategy? What's the method of doing that?
Look, it's very much one-to-one.
Right, okay.
You get into a conversation about life, or about why you're there, or whatever. And the smartest thing I ever heard as a management lesson was smart managers ask questions.
Yeah, okay.
Rather than telling people what you're doing, saying, what do you think about? Why do you reckon I'm down here? How about... all those things that elicit people and make them curious, make them start to ask questions, and hopefully there's some light bulb moments. You can't force it. People are volunteers. They're there.
That's the number one.
That's
the number one thing.
They've signed on. They've got the patrol ready. They've signed on. They've signed off.
You can't make their life harder, is the truth, right? Because if you do, you put the burden of debt. I know. But as soon as you add obligation to something as passion, you create a change in mix.
Yeah.
It's a paradigm. It's a paradigm. We met through a business community, which we both really enjoy being part of.
Right.
And it's lovely to catch up to be able to do these things and then find out what's interesting. And my take to that is how you, as a volunteer, if you're in that space, you tend to gravitate to others that are similar and like-minded. And I think it was pretty quick that we found out we're of similar and like-mindedness, which has probably created a layer of friendship that might not have occurred. Because we didn't have that commonality in place. That like-mindedness was that somewhere I'd mentioned Firefly and you'd gone, I need you to tell me what's Firefly, please, because I'm one of you. So can you tell me what drew you to Firefly a little bit? And then maybe, I know we're early days with your club around Firefly, and we're building stuff out to try and improve feedback loops. So number one is why Firefly, you were drawn to Firefly, and number two, ideas, aspirations and thoughts that you think a club could use in a new digital world with young people that you want to try and motivate, how Firefly could add value.
Okay. Obviously, for those that don't know, and perhaps I'm not quite getting it right, being able to recognise, get people to record the time that they put in and then have that recognised, particularly in terms of the Firefly offering, in terms of discounts or goods and services, that recognition is really important. Surf Lifesaving does that really well. When you record patrol hours, they get logged into a system. That's fine. But it doesn't recognise the people like me who, conservatively, I reckon over the last 5 years it's been, if not 1 day a week, perhaps 3 full-time days a week where I haven't earned an income because I've been working on the club. And that's my own crazy moment. But there are many people in that position where they're just seemingly putting in all this work because they love the lifestyle or their kids are involved. Mine aren't involved, but for whatever reason they're involved in the club, they want to give back. Just nice to recognise that, not just to give the individual recognition, but so that amongst the wider group and their peers, we start to say, well, it's not just patrolling that's important. It's not just providing water safety for the nippers that's important. There's a whole lot of other things that are necessary to make the club run, and they are measured differently, but just as important.
It's really funny you should say that, because we had an interview a couple of weeks ago with Alan, and you'll get to look at that if you choose,
I will.
Viewers. And Alan talked about 650 hours in his time. He'd logged Firefly hours, and he didn't know what he actually did. He just did. And when he looked back and retrospectively applied knowledge against what he was doing, he realised he was actually falling short in areas because he didn't have the time to achieve those properly. So it allowed him to look at the structures of these committees and the way in which he went around his volunteering in a different way. And he made some changes, and he said it's a massive effect. Why? Because now he's got someone that does this task that he was doing half-hearted and just trying to fill a gap, to actually putting someone in the seat to fill that properly. So it's amazing. I hate to think we're going to force timesheets. It's not about that. It's more about knowledge that can empower us in a future that's challenging. Volunteering is not going to be easy coming forward. That's Pandora's box. Sorry, open up that one.
Let's digress now. What I'd love to see in Firefly is, while I'm logged into one of the email accounts that the Treasurer, my own accounts at and info at Waratah Beach, that something is logging that and says, do you want to record those hours? Of course I do. I transacted stuff. When I've logged into...
That's almost like an accounting, that model of in the action, do the action.
Yes. Because I find it so hard, because I would have to log in multiple times a day. And then there are other times where I've got an outstanding task. A couple of people have been chasing me for a while to rewrite the Constitution. Now, we've had some guy...
Sorry, I laugh because we're doing one of those with what I do.
somebody put up a draft. A few of us meant to discuss it, and I've promised to turn it into a final document that we can send out to members before the AGM. And honestly, perhaps I should talk to you about AI.
Possibly an idea.
But no, we have a draft. It's a marked up version of a Word document.
But it's a task. It's a tough task. It's really a legal task, right? Let's be honest, right? Who wants to pay a solicitor? You got to find a solicitor. Have you got a skills match in your all? You do.
He was the one who, fortunately, and he was the one who wrote the template, because he works for Surf Life Saving Australia and Surf Life Saving Victoria. Happens to be with our club. But it still needs that intimate history of the club and how things work, and then to slap your hand on your forehead and say, we actually need to rewrite the bylaws. Because when I went back through our Dropbox, I don't know that we've kept that up to date. Since the version I wrote in 1995, it's the only complete set. So somebody, sadly, I think I'm the person. Sadly, I think I'm the person now who says, let's get an index of all the bylaws that we need, farm them out to people to write, and really commit to writing them, because the club will operate better that way.
So my mind goes to the greater market when you say things like that, of volunteerism and community. We often talk at length about how there are 80-something thousand clubs sporting clubs across Australia, of which Surf Life Saving picks up a big contingent of those.
I think it's 302.
302. There you go. 302 clubs across Australia with however many members. Some of them are massive clubs, thousands of members in Queensland. Into small communities and not-for-profits and charities and causes, which is another not-for-profit sector of about 250,000 plus. How often do we isolate ourselves in islands and do the tasks that we could probably do across a fraternity or a wider group if we collaborated better? It's a constant question for me, and it's something I think we all need to solve as the nature of volunteerism becomes trickier,
Yeah.
and the work or people we've got, the labour force we've got, diminishes.
Yeah.
How do we collaborate better? So I'm going to ask, why isn't that collaborated more effectively throughout the whole of life saving?
Yeah.
And then you think about the next step beyond that.
Look, everybody's parochial. Everybody thinks they're unique.
Is that good?
No.
No.
There are a couple of clubs in our area. The Surf Lifesaving in Victoria is in districts.
Yeah.
And one of them has a really nice set of procedures.
Right.
And stroke bylaws.
Yep.
So
a model standard, they would call that, wouldn't they?
well, I think we're all big enough, and our relationship with that club is good enough that we can say, here's our index, we've got a gap here, can we take yours, clone it, and away we go. But
so I'm going to ask another question, and it's only because I'm inquisitive.
That's you.
That's me.
Yeah.
So you've identified an opportunity to do that, which is great. The other thing you've done amazing is you've identified the skills in your organisation to do it in the first place, which is fantastic. You can be parochial if you've got all the skills. If you don't, another question altogether. And then the final piece is you've got Surflising, which is a peak body that is responsible for assisting and driving compliance and fortitude and all these things you need to do as a club to sustain under a body of saving lives.
Yes.
Pretty important shit.
Yes.
Is there a cohesion piece that goes there as well? Because that, to me, instantly goes, it's not cohesive.
No,
it's not.
No.
And then why?
Why?
And I'm not trying. This is not about.
Okay.
I think this is the same everywhere, mate.
Because I think, certainly in Victoria, and I'm not quite sure if this is going to be edited out.
It won't be edited out. This is honest dialogue. We're chatting about a changing world in volunteerism and community.
The state body is regressively part of Emergency Management Victoria.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So there are those political requirements and that managing upwards.
Yep.
And that doesn't sit with the volunteerism nature
it's all right.
of the clubs.
It's all right. And I can tell you this, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Grassroots, for whatever reason, doesn't quite align.
Yes.
It's not quite in the remit that works easily.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking hard. Sorry for swearing everyone out there, but it is. It's bloody hard running a grassroots organisation.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
I mean, it's almost like the CFA, which were volunteers, and the MFB, who were the paid professionals, and those two organisations clashed.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course.
They clashed. Now, Lifesaving Victoria has their heart in the right spot.
Yes.
But the focus is on providing training as a paid alternative to the wider community.
Yeah.
So the clubs end up being a little bit left to their own devices.
They do, and so we do the same thing we've done for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. We do the same thing, right? It needs to change. And Firefly, we're going to be in amongst that change. We can't change it all. But the really, really bit that intrigues me is then, so we talk about sponsorship, which is the other side of that fence, which is how do people give money? How does NAB give money? They've got their own challenges that are identical. That are exactly the same. And so we've got this scenario where we've got chuck a sign on the fence. It's $500 to get the sign right, and you just picked a $750 sponsorship.
Yeah.
You've picked $250. Guess who wins in that? The sign writer, right?
Yes.
To me, I look at that and go, I footy clubs, it doesn't know where I go, all those signs, no one ever looks at them twice because they become part of the fence. And someone's spent a fortune putting them out there for either pride, ego, or whatever the other reason is, when that money could have just gone straight to the club under a smarter delivery mechanism, but we just do the same.
Yeah. Well,
why do we do the same, Paul? Why? Why?
You talk about...
no, anyone.
I don't want to talk about their competitors, but the Bendigo Bank are putting up the sign. They've given us some money for a defibrillator on the outside of the building.
Brilliant.
It's down there now. It hasn't been...
Bendigo's carved out. They've made a really smart positioning in community. So I agree with you. They've gone the extra play. Yeah. 100%.
And I have a personal relationship with the person, and she said...
Do you bank with them?
Me personally?
Oh, you do as well?
Oh, yes, me personally, and the club does.
So isn't that amazing? So the club does and you do as well.
Yes.
So there's an affinity that you've built with that brand. Yep.
Yeah. Despite the fact that Westpac is an association sponsor.
Right.
But I don't know the history.
Oh, by the way, that's another one. Levels of sponsorship through all the different peak bodies and the different departments of people. It's really hard to bring all that together.
Yeah. But the Bendigo Bank is quite local, and it's the Foster and Tura branch is a standalone piece, and they've got a board who manage this sponsorship and donation piece.
So you get money from those guys?
Yes.
Where else do you find money?
It's mainly the people who are already associated with the club in some way, or one person removed.
Yep.
People tap other people on the shoulder. Grant writing is always problematic.
Have you paid people for grant writing?
No.
Ooh, that's lucky.
No, because Surf Lifesaving has a foundation based in Queensland who will help you write grants. As part of...
That's it. Well, okay, that's a good contribution. It's good.
Oh, look, it's fantastic. And they're great people, really, really helpful. But, and I'll speak really selfishly here, you get the grant, you write the grant, and we've got a number of people willing to help write grants. But I just get so nervous about the return on investment unless it's a big ticket item.
So something that it's a $2,000 grant, the work effort's marginal, right?
I often say I'd be better off just donating the $2,000 than with this defibrillator.
Yeah.
We had to change what the funds were applied to because
of course,
the first one fell over and that group disbanded, a whole bunch of reasons, but then renegotiated, had to rewrite a new letter explaining why we're going to change, number of phone calls,
hoops and jumps and bureaucracy
and then who's going to decide what the actual device is? So you go back to that group of active members in the active committee, and someone finally tells you, I don't mean to be negative, someone in their own time, because we're all volunteers, gets back to you and says this is it, and then because I've got access to the system, I'm the one that places the order, I get it delivered to my place.
There's a lot of moving parts for that
and
outcome.
Then we've got a guy, handyman down there doing some paid work on maintenance over the winter. Leave it down there, take some photographs of it as I've unpacked it. I went down on a Friday night for 2 hours. 2 hours down, did an hour or 2 hours work down there, drove back to Melbourne.
5 hours in the Firefly app right there, mate. 6, sorry.
Actually, 2 hours and 5 minutes from home, so it's probably a fraction more, though I left straight after work. I don't know. And I didn't put it in because so when I turn up at Sandy Point, it should ask me, you've turned up in Sandy Point now.
Geo.
Should you be logging that as
Geo works beautifully for clubs. Yeah, it really does. We looked at it, not so great for charities all the time, but I think you're right. Our job is to simplify the volunteer task. But on the reverse of that, the truth is also that the app is pretty simple. It's a click, add for whatever it is.
Yes.
So compared to the work you talked about with the grants, to be able to get all of your team in the volunteering to be able to do it, it's not complex.
No.
I'm as much interested about the psychological value piece of the volunteer, which is how do we say to them thank you? How do we position it in a way that is meaningful to them? And what further effort could we go to really to provide that level of comfort that the Firefly is about community, is about the volunteers' success and outcomes. Yeah. What other things?
So how do we, and you're right, absolutely right. What about Cameron, who for 3 years has spent every single weekend from the start of the season, last weekend of November, a bit earlier this year, right through to the end of January, and then every weekend up until Easter or just after this year, he's donated that time.
There are over 150,000 Camerons in Australia that do more than 500 hours a year.
Oh, absolutely.
Well over. It's incredible to think that through.
And I don't know how old he is, but he's still an active and patrolling member.
Hats off to Cameron.
And just enormously respected by everybody else. I think Cam's always around. Yeah. He's my go-to when I say who's around, is such and such a person down there at the moment.
Yeah. Good people create more work for themselves in volunteering. It's a funny paradigm, and Cameron, you're a effing champion. And so we'll close with one thing, and we'll lean into Cameron a little bit on that. So, how would we better say thank you to Cameron? Not only from the way the club positions to Cameron, but the community positions to Cameron.
Yeah.
What are the sorts of things? And these people like to fly under the radar. But I heard a story once that someone said my most treasured gift was when I wasn't expecting it, and I received an Order of Australia for doing good, and it sits on my mantelpiece and is my favourite thing in the house I look at. It's got to be something in there around this that it's a self-reflective thing. It's a memory of what you did.
Yes.
And if you don't document, or the stories aren't told, or the NAB doesn't tell the story of the DFIB and the amazing contribution, then we're missing something here, mate.
Yeah. I mean, Cam was best clubman the season before this. Gone.
So best clubman. Yeah. There's recognition.
You get your name on the honour board and stuff like that. But it's still, and while that's extremely prestigious and sought after, and it's a great honour in a way. I don't know that he's got a trophy on the wall because of it, or a permanent reminder, or even if his mum and dad, who were very, very active in the club, and who are still
generational
still
volunteers. We'll get into that another conversation. That's for another day.
How do you get somebody to feel it inwardly?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
I think it's about knowing secretly, in whether it's a secret society position or whatever, that I'm one of those few people, and without recognising that I am, because when I go and shop somewhere, someone has said thank you to me, and when we talk about cost of living, we talk about these little things, micro feelings add up to big feelings. And so I think there's something in it, and that's where we've led into, to be honest. And we continue to try and drive that one, mate. I'm going to close out. It's been an absolutely beautiful conversation. I want to say from the absolute bottom of my heart, thank you for being a magnificent volunteer. All right? Because the world doesn't roll without us, and certainly Australia is built off the back of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have yourself a lovely day. And again, thank you, mate.